we know the large proportion of students we're going to encounter are not interested, and like how do we help them? Like they're gonna stuff up my lesson plan, man. Like how am I gonna help these students, right? The first thing I want to say is it's the right question to ask. So it's also a question that's not only the right one to ask, but it's also just hard to answer. I'd love to just give you, here's the thing you do, instantly, no problems, right? One of the things that happened during COVID was that people who work for the Department of Education, so I work for a school, but I also work for the department. They have all these people who support schools who aren't necessarily based in schools as well, so I kind of do a bit of both, right? Because I have a death wish and I wear too many hats. So anyway, apart from that, during COVID, there were some really tough times where there just were not enough teachers to take classes, and the COVID self-isolation rules made it even worse because even the people who could teach, it's like, sorry, I'm out of action for 7 days, right? So one of the things that people like me had to do was we'd have to front up to a school that wasn't our normal school and just teach a day of casual, and some of it was maths lessons and some of it was not. And one of the things that was really hard about that, and I wonder if you're going to start to hear my implied answer to your question in my story, is that when I walked into a school that was not my school, it was kind of like I was in my first year teaching all over again, because I was no longer Mr. Wu, the person who's been at this school as long as anyone can remember. This is my 10th year at my current school, so year 7s don't know a time, sorry, year 12s even, don't know a time before I was there. So I'm well established as part of the school. People know who I am, and even like several students within the school, they've had siblings from years ago who I've taught. They know what I'm okay with and what I'm not. I don't have to establish myself from scratch when I walk into the classroom, right? But in these new schools, all bets are off the table, and unsurprisingly, I found it, as anyone else would, a lot more challenging to walk into that environment and have just an ordinary lesson. It's gonna sound weird, but when I was preparing for today and having looking at some of the questions, right, I was reflecting on the fact that some of the advice that 2023 me would give to first year teaching 2008 me would just not have made sense to 2008 me, or couldn't have been done by 2008 me. Example, how do you discipline or manage a classroom when like kids are rowdy and they're going everywhere and they have no interest whatsoever? And 2023 me would say something like, you need to change the way that you look at them. And 2008 me literally would have no idea what that means, nor, once I understood it, could actually do it, right? There's this development of the teacher persona that is a really, like, it just takes time. You know, it's not a skill that I can just teach you how to do it and then off you go, right? So returning back to your original question, I wonder if you can hear me implying that a lot of the challenge that we have with students who are disinterested is actually that we haven't formed a good relationship with our students yet, right? A quote that I heard like back when I was your age, and it's stayed with me ever since, most of your ages, has stayed with me ever since, is that relationship is the medium for learning. Just like air is the medium for sound. No air, no sound. In space, no one can hear you scream. And if you don't have a good relationship, a good dynamic with your students, which by the way, is very much not the same as being their friend, it's not the same thing, right? If you don't have that relationship and dynamic set up, that rapport, it's really hard to do anything. And so those early days, weeks with your students are critical in terms of understanding, why is it that you struggle? What is the thing about this subject that you find difficult or unenjoyable, right? If you can take the time to know a student, know students and how they learn, Australian Professional Standard for Teaching number one for a reason, because without that, none of the rest of it matters. And then I think there's other, there's sort of more subject specific things that we could get into. So for instance, when it comes to why a student is struggling with calculus, which they will mostly all struggle with calculus. It's wild to me how much their struggle with calculus is because actually they never really understood coordinate geometry from 3 years ago. Really basic ideas, right? Like say, what is gradient? What even is that? Like, I mean, I know that I can calculate it by doing rise over run because it's easy to remember, but what does it even mean and why do I care about it? And if, you can imagine, you've probably encountered students who can calculate gradient, but they don't know anything about its significance, meaning, or why you should care about it. So when we introduce them to differentiation by first principles, they've got no hook to hang that on, right? And it's wild to me that really it was probably in my first year of uni that I really got the differentiation by first principles. Like, f of x plus h minus f of x all divided by h is just rise over run. I didn't know that, right? I'd calculated it hundreds of times, but didn't really get it. And so not really getting it is often what's underneath. Why do so many students struggle? They're missing foundational pieces. That's probably something that in our subject, in mathematics, is more of an issue than in any other. So hopefully that gives you a few practical tools and suggestions for how to help those students.